Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Preston,
And I'm Sarah Adams,
and you're listening to
the Writing Docs podcast.
where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers. If your team needs help achieving positive writing outcomes, then contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com. Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth, and I'm an executive consultant at Hurley Write. And you're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we talk about how businesses can help their team members to become better and more confident writers. And I'm excited to have here with us Erica Breuer on our podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Erica.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Excited to be here. We've talked so much online and now we get to talk in person.
Yay! Actual online, in-person communication. Erica holds a Bachelor's of Liberal Arts from the Harvard Extension School, and she has more than a decade of experience in writing, editing, and in building brands in the startup and consulting arenas. She's also created and sold a very successful personal branding business along the way. Erica now works with leaders as a messaging and thought leadership strategist to create thoughtful, meaningful, and clear messages and positioning strategies for their brand so that they can connect with potential clients. She is, to put it succinctly, the message maker. Now, Erica, you're a specialist in creating clear messages. First, what is messaging? And why do you feel that clear messaging is such a struggle for so many people?
I get the question about messaging a lot. And a lot of folks find me because they're searching for a copywriter and then they start hearing the words messaging strategy and they do a double take. Wait, which one do I need? What's the difference? And it is nuanced. The way that I explain it is that messaging strategy, it's really what you're talking about, right? What are those key concepts or big ideas that you want to convey to your audience? A messaging strategy puts a hierarchy around those big ideas, right? What do I say where? What do I say when? And why? Whereas copy is just how you say it. Think of it this way. If it was personal style, right? Your messaging strategy is that overall style that you want to have when you show up in the world. Copy is the bow tie or the earrings that you choose based on that sense of style. And right,
Or the purse.
Or the purse, right?
Yes. We love a good
Right?
Coach bag.
It could even be the color of the headphones that you choose as a podcaster, right? Everything can give you cues into those bigger ideas. But if you don't have those bigger ideas established and a messaging strategy established, copy just becomes noise. So to go back to your other question, though, why do so many people struggle with messaging? It's pretty simple. And I want to stress that it's not due to talent, right? It's not due to who you are, right? Even the most non-writer types that I work with can become good at messaging. But their problem starts in grade school, right? You're taught literacy, you're taught grammar, you're taught how to read and write or how to make a critical essay about Macbeth, right? But you're not taught the psychology of how people make decisions or the ways that they're persuaded. And then that just continues in college, right? Most of what you're going to do at the college or university level is aimed at making you great at what you do. And like, right, maybe you're on a debate team, you get a little bit in the way of persuasion, or really you enter the workforce not knowing what it takes in order to help people to adopt your ideas. And that's the good news is that even if you don't have that, it's just a matter of training and you can get good at messaging.
I don't know if you know this, Erica, but we have a running joke on this podcast that every bad writing habit anyone has is because of college. It's all college's fault.
100%.
And you're absolutely right. College and school, okay, school teaches us literacy. We need that. That's fine. I don't know if we needed Macbeth essays, but fine. when you get to college, college teaches you how to write for college. It doesn't teach you how to write for the real world. Usually people get English 101, English 102, maybe one other one. And then you're supposed to remember all that from when you were 18 and 19 for the rest of your life. And that's just not accurate.
Yeah, it's not how our brains work, and it's not how other people's brains work.
True. Now, we at Hurley Wright, we run into a lot of people who have difficulty with creating clear messages internally and externally, meaning that they have trouble with it when they're talking to their own teams, as well as when they're talking to people outside their worlds, like potential clients or vendors. What are some of the common pitfalls you see in leaders trying to create messages? You've mentioned in our previous conversations that mixed messaging can be a problem. What is mixed messaging and what's the danger in messaging?
Right. And we're talking about leaders here. Leaders are leaders for a reason. They're great at what they do. They have a lot of information up here, and they're passionate about that information. And that's what leads to those pitfalls. I usually see three, right? So you'll run into the leader who they know everything, they say everything, right? And their audience gets overwhelmed. A lot of leaders also forget what it's like not to be a leader. So they'll share what they would want to hear, but they forget to share what their audience would want to hear, right? Or especially, and I see this a lot with new or emerging leaders, right? They don't know what to say or how to say it. So they copy other leaders that they admire or that they aspire to be like. But that results in a lot of meaningless messaging or messaging that sounds like a corporate PR robot generated it.
Yes, the AI generated message. We've seen a lot of those. And so the mixed messaging is seems to be the leaders that have everything to say and they're not really picking one niche. Is that correct?
Yeah, I see mixed messaging show up in a lot of different ways. We outlined those three pitfalls. Depending on the combination of pitfalls you're working with, those mixed messages will look different. But they're characterized by usually two things. You know right away you're dealing with a mixed message, right? You're either engaging or attracting the wrong people, or, right? The right people are doing the wrong thing after they experience your messaging. That's how you know it's a mixed message.
What do you mean the right people are doing the wrong thing?
So let's say, I mean, who's your audience? Let's bring it down into a real example.
Oh, we love our engineers, our
Yeah.
pharmaceutical folks, and our technology folks. We love those people.
Yep. And so we want them to listen to your podcast, and there's probably one or two things we want them to do, right? We want them to send friends to the podcast, or we want them to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I need your help. Everything you shared was so helpful," right? But let's say they're doing something else. They message you on LinkedIn and they ask you for help that's not related to what you do. It falls outside the scope of Hurley Rights, right? That's when we go, wait, there's a mixed message here, right? We emphasized something that compelled them to do that, right? And sometimes human behavior is just human behavior, but usually we can pinpoint where things got mixed up.
Interesting. That's really interesting because you see that a lot on LinkedIn, right? People saying, make sure to talk to your audience. And sometimes we don't talk about what the audience does afterwards once you've talked to them. Do they do what you want them to do? Are they doing something, but not the thing you want them to do?
Hmm.
So that's key. So for us, we've seen issues with mixed messaging, both internal communications with companies and external communications. You said in at least in our previous conversations, mixed messaging we don't want to do. We want more of a fixed message. What is a fixed message and how do we know when we've reached fixed messaging?
Is it okay if I give you another example? I like examples.
I love examples.
So I have a client, I'll call her Michelle because I don't want to blast her all over the internet here.
Fair.
But she came to me, she runs a leadership development firm. and they were doing some event based marketing. And they were finding that the wrong people were showing up for those events. And the people who did show up that were the right people, again, they weren't doing the right thing. And when we looked at her messaging, right, she was speaking to those individual contributors that she, in fact, her team would be coaching once someone became a client. They were also getting a lot of other leadership coaches attending these events, right? They weren't getting enough decision makers, and their decision makers were, in fact, folks in like learning and development, executives within that category of business, right? So we had to look at her messaging. And when we looked at her messaging, a lot of what she was putting out there was that skills based, right? Here's how to improve your skills when it came to this type of leadership development. She wasn't talking about the business problems that learning and development executives care about, right? And those events weren't positioned in terms of those higher level business problems that the decision makers she wanted in those events need to hear about in order to be compelled to put that event on their calendar in the first place. Right? So the
Yeah.
ratios were off. She was probably 80-20 when it came to skill building versus those business problems. So she reframed the events, right? And then the ratios of the messages she shared, she really focused on those higher level problems, and she saw a better turnout for all of the event marketing her firm was doing. And
That's
that's how you know it's a fixed message.
the fixed message essentially gives you the result that you want. That's when you
It's the
know that you
result you
have
want, the
it.
right people doing the right things.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of this sounds like it has to do with audience analysis. You need to know who you're talking to and why you're talking to them and what you want them to do. So, how do you figure out who your audience is? I've heard people say, my audience is everyone. But is it?
I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth for a minute. I hope that's okay.
Yes.
So, a lot of people like me, messaging strategists, right, marketing people, when they're asked that question, they'll go into, right, target audience. We need to think about niche. And that's true, but corporate marketing and branding principles don't always perfectly map over boutique brands or personal brands. Here's what I mean. When you're first starting out, it's impossible to know who your niche is, right? You're in the process of figuring out who you're for and who you're not. So at the beginning, typically your audience is everyone, right? And there's a learning curve there. Seen some folks figure it out in about a year. Other folks, it's more like 3 to 5 years, right? But once you're at that growth point, right, and there's a rhythm and a kind of a churn to how you're doing things, the audience of everyone does become a problem. Here's how I help people think about it when they're at that turning point, right? Because they'll still be, I've been serving everyone. It works. I'm at cruising altitude, right? I tell them to think about Coca Cola, right? Because very few brands serve everyone well, but Coca Cola does. But Coca Cola also has, I think it's a $4 billion advertising budget, hundreds of thousands of people working for them around the world. I love the leaders I work with, but they're not Coca Cola. And they're getting spread very thin trying to satisfy everyone. So I tell them,
Hmm.
think about Coca Cola. You're not Coca Cola, right? That's when they finally say, oh, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to start narrowing my focus. I don't know if I'm ready for niche yet. Getting to that point of focus can still feel kind of scary, right? So we talk Coca Cola, then I get them thinking about the Super Bowl. So lightning strikes, somehow you're able to afford a Super Bowl ad. It's a hit ad, and thousands of people want to work with you, right? More than you could possibly handle in the next 5 years. How would you start sorting through that list? People always say, I think about the highest paying. I think about people who have the work that I want to do, the problems I like to solve. And I weed out the people I know I don't want to work with, right? And even if you're not niched, right? That's not hyper focus. It is still focus, and it lets you make a lot of decisions about how you position your brand, right? And how you market your message.
So, if we take this kind of audience analysis and apply it to, let's say, the pharmaceutical world, the engineers, the technology folks, how do we help them understand who their audience is? in part, I think it sounds like we have to ask, who do you want to serve?
Mhm. Who do you want to serve? And then a lot of folks, they'll start looking at how do I define my audience? How do I research my audience? And they'll fall down the rabbit hole of customer avatars, right? Or buyer avatars. And before you know it, you're defining your target audience's dog's eye color. But you don't have much ammunition to help you with messaging, right? And so that's the point where you're going to dive a little bit deeper and go past those demographics and really start thinking about those psychographics. And when I help leaders do that, I walk them through what I call my OO and AH framework. So the OO is objectives, obstacles, and outcomes. And then, depending on what we're talking about, I unpack differently. For personal brands, right, or a message that's more personal, I'll put it that way, right? We're going to think about elements of empathy and humanity. They're going to resonate with our audience. For something that's more professionally oriented, or let's say it's the company itself as opposed to a personal brand sharing that message, we're going to think about action and high level understanding, right? How does our audience typically like to take action? What is the high level understanding, and how do they typically build high level understandings of any concept, right? So the OO and AH framework can help you go from think about the dog's eye color, right, to really painting a picture in the color that your audience needs to hear it.
So it sounds like if we were to do this to engineers, for example, we'd say, okay, who do you actually serve? Okay, construction, it depends on kind of the field, project managers, you're probably going to talk to finance people. What outcome do you want to have with the writing that you're putting out? Well, I want them to hire me and I want it to be on a long term basis. Is that sort of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so if I'm an engineering leader, let's say I'm putting together a report for my next monthly meeting and I'm meeting with executives. Executives aren't going to care about the technical mumbo jumbo, right? They're kind of like those learning and development guys we mentioned earlier. They care about the business problems. So I need to frame the work that I'm so passionate about and all of the subject matter expertise I have in terms of those business problems. But if I'm working with my subordinates, I need to get into the technical mumbo jumbo, right? Like they're going to be passionate about that, and they're not going to care about bottom line revenue. They're just they might, but they're probably not going to. Likewise, if I'm talking to a vendor, it goes back to those business level problems, right? There might be some technical depending on what type of vendor it is, right? And you're talking about the same thing, but from very different angles.
Hmm. You put that very clearly. I appreciate that. Now, we found that part of assessing audience is saying what the audience knows, what they need to know, and what they want to know. And we found that a lot of people struggle with that, especially when they are trying to break down these complicated ideas and make them accessible. What are some ways that you found that worked for breaking down complicated ideas and making them accessible for audiences?
I just want to pause and say I like the way that you frame that. What they already know, what they need to know, and what they want to know. Is it okay if I steal that? That's great.
Steal it.
But when it comes to complex ideas, right, you get the advice, just dumb it down, right? Or just write the way you talk. And that sounds reasonable, but it's not really helpful. Like where do you go from there? So, in the design world, and this is what I teach my clients and the leaders that I work with, it's all about simplicity, right? Simplicity is just the concept of elegant complexity, right? You get to have both at once. And the way that you do that from a messaging standpoint is giving your audience those mental anchor points, right? As you unfold the information. We've done that in a couple ways today, right? Ooh, an awe framework, that's fun, that's playful, that's accessible, right? Audience analysis is dry, it's kind of boring, it doesn't sound fun. But with an ooh and ah framework, you've got that easy mental, even though we know a lot more goes into audience analysis, it seems easy, it seems reasonable, it seems like something anyone could do, right? That's simplicity. You can do it with alliteration, you can do it with rhyming, right? We talked about going from fixed message to mixed message, right? That's
Hmm.
something everyone can get on board with. And of course, stories. You hear a lot about storytelling. I talked about Coca-Cola, the Super Bowl, right? When you frame things that way, it goes from a boring lecture about niching to something that's relatable and accessible. That's complexity.
I was going to ask, did I hear that right? But I did. It is simplexity. I love it.
And you can make up words too. Made up words are a great anchor point. They're memorable.
Yeah, you're trying to trigger people to remember your message and remember the important points. Then they can dig for details later.
But another great thing you can do is you can say, hey, I'm going to explain this in terms of one, two, and three. Or I'm going to explain this in terms of clarity, curiosity, connection, right? Then your audience has those to work with as you start moving through the nitty gritty of it, what you want to say. All about anchor points.
Hmm. I think anchor points are really important also for another form of communication that a lot of businesses are facing, whether that's engineering, pharmaceutical, technology, especially technology, but any business really, which is dealing with social media. It is kind
Mm.
of just a part of our lives, and that's that. So we need to figure out how to deal with it. We know that social media is a way to get out our messages, to advertise, to connect with possible partners, possible podcast guests, possible customers. What are some of your tips for putting out clear, fixed messages on social media for businesses? Anchoring was one of them. The memorable message, doing something like rhyming or alliteration. Are there others?
Yeah. So if you've got your messaging strategy, right, you're really clear about what you want to be known for, those big ideas, and who your audience is, what they need to hear. Your goal at that point isn't just to put ideas or isn't just to share messages on social media, right? That's actually just advertising. And if you approach social media that way, you're going to be set up to fail, right? Advertising's one sided. It worked when all I had was a radio commercial to go off of right before buying your product. Social media, it's baked into the name, it's social. So your goal is to shape your messages so that you can start a conversation with your audience. You could do that in some really simple ways, right? You can bake in questions, right? So that they're compelled to answer and engage with you, right? Or you can give them details that hinge into that relating and that sharing in the comments section, right? So I could talk about the Super Bowl, or I could talk about the time I had a startup job, the startup sold, and then I had to figure out what to do with my life and I became an entrepreneur, right? That's the power of story. Again, that's that simplexity, right? The big question to ask yourself with social media content is, am I lecturing or am I interacting? You always want to be interacting with the way you shape that message.
And I'm just going to ask this question because I've seen people waste their lives on LinkedIn, social media. They're spending hours and hours. What is reasonable to spend on social media interacting with audiences?
An hour a day.
Okay. That's a guideline we can follow. That's very clear. Love it.
An hour a day is great social media hygiene for any platform.
Okay. That means, folks, cut it off at 1 hour. Get off. Go touch grass. Something. Now I gotta ask, TikTok. Is it something that thought leaders should hop on board with, or something that thought leaders should stay off of at this point?
I don't know if it's a question of on or off, right? Because listen, I know board certified doctors, legal experts, structural engineer, like really credentialed people. They're on social media. It's working. I'm not just social media, TikTok. It's working well for them, right? They have huge audiences. They're generating leads. The efficacy of the platform is working, right? It's not a question of the platform. It's a question of your personal style and strengths. So if you have the gift of gab and you can talk to a camera like there's actually someone on the other end of it, get on TikTok. But if that's not your strength, if that's not your style or the strengths of someone on your team, TikTok's not going to be for you, right? Instagram, there was a time when Instagram was about pretty graphics and pretty words, right? If you're not a visual person or you don't have that capability, you don't do Instagram, right? Twitter, X now. I hate thinking of it as X. Twitter, you used to be able to, you had to have a really quick, clear, concise message. If you're a rambler, you don't belong on Twitter. It just boils down to where are you strongest and where is your audience. So, yeah, if you're a talker, get on TikTok.
I love that you said that. It boils down to audience, message, and who you are. Because sometimes I think leaders go, I got to hop on board with this. This is going crazy. And it's like, well, that's not really you, Bob. Let's maybe stay off of TikTok or something. And maybe you're more suited for LinkedIn, and that's okay. But forcing your personality into something that doesn't work for you, it's going to feel disingenuous, I think. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And TikTok gets a bad rap. If you think back to 2004, maybe 2008, when Facebook was the new hot thing, a lot of more established professionals looked at it. Okay, that's a place for teenagers or college students. That's not a place for me. Right? There were some assumptions and misperceptions going into what was possible. But I can tell you, TikTok is for you if you like to talk, and no, you don't have to dance.
I love that. Okay. All right. If you're not a dancer, don't dance on TikTok. In light of all of your experience, what is your number one rule for clear communication for all businesses and leaders?
The number one rule. I have a lot of rules, but they're not rules. They're more like best practices, right? And I think maybe that would be my advice. You have to make it your own, right? There's best practice, but then there's what's best for you. And you're looking for that intersection for you as an individual, but also for the overall strategy of your business. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't have to dance again. It's all right. Do
You
what's
don't
best
have
for
to
you.
dance. Yep.
Now, Erica, there are 3 questions that we always ask our guests. Are you ready for the 3 questions?
Hold on. Ready.
Awesome. We had to meditate. First one. What is one thing that you wish you'd been taught about writing that would have made your professional writing life easier?
Can I talk about something I wish that I hadn't been taught?
Yeah, we could do that too. I mean, that's question number 2, but we can roll with it.
Yeah, I entered the workforce back in the day. Like the recession was still, our first recession, I guess I should say, was still kind of fresh. And if you had the words liberal arts on your degree, you were an idiot. What were you thinking? You just wasted your time. You're not valuable within a company, right? And as it turns out, the more I lean into that training and my ability to work just across discipline, bounce off of weird angles, right, all over to different points of culture, the better my professional life has gotten. So I just, yeah, I wish that I'd been taught that liberal arts is an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Very important in today's world. I'll ask you the second question, even though you kind of answered it from a big point of view, a big picture. But what is one writing rule or habit that we hear a lot about but doesn't seem to serve you in your actual writing? Like, don't split an infinitive or never end on a preposition.
This is what I'm really passionate about. It's not a grammatical rule. It's more of habits and practice. You'll hear the advice right in the morning, right? First thing in the morning before you do anything else. We've given morning people way too much power, in my opinion, in this society. Right when you feel inspired, right when you feel the most energized, right when you feel about it, like feel good about it. You don't have to write first thing in the morning if it doesn't work for you.
Is your we've given morning people too much power a hot take?
I mean, yeah, it is.
Oh, the tea is being spilled today. Question number 3.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you wish people knew about writing, specifically about writing in leadership positions?
Oh man, I feel like I'm stuck and not in a rut, but in a little bit of a theme or a trend here. So much of what you've been taught to think of as professional was this is a hot take. It was defined by men, right, who were just learning to use rotary phones. And I wish more
Oh,
people knew you get to decide for yourself, right? You don't have to dance on TikTok. You don't have to write in the morning. You can bend and break the rules of grammar as it works for you. Best practice versus what's best for you, right? And when you're setting that messaging strategy, part of that process is defining what a professional, meaningful message means to you and the people you want to connect with today. Right. So, really, I just want people to know rethink what you think of as professional and frame it in terms of today in 2024.
except always use the Oxford comma. Long live the Oxford comma. That has to stay.
You can end up with some really tangled lists without the Oxford comma.
That's the one thing that has to stay. Erica, we also have a segment called Doctor's Diagnosis, where listeners and clients submit their writing ailments and we write prescriptions for them to fix those writing woes. So here's our listener's ailment. It comes from a small business owner. I'm a co owner of a business that's been around for about 10 years, and we're quite successful. But I see the potential that social media has for our business, and I've finally convinced my partner that we need to start leveraging social media and getting the word out about our company. I've mostly been posting on LinkedIn for about 4 months, and I'm not getting much traction. I'll get a few followers and likes each week, but I'm not getting potential customers reaching out to me to hire us. What am I doing wrong? Are there ways I can make my ideas and posts pop out and be more memorable for people so that they'll come to us and hire our company?
Hmm. Talk about a can of worms, right? Oh, there's a million questions I want to ask, but we don't have this person here. So I'm going to try and break this down as I hope they listen to this and it's helpful as generally as I can, right? There's a few different strategies that you need to put in place all at the same time to make social media work for you. We talked a lot about messaging strategy. I won't break that down again. But if you have a firm messaging strategy, you're going to layer a content strategy on top of that, right? What you post when, what types of formats, what types of language work best for your audience on any given platform. So let's say you have a solid messaging strategy, a solid content strategy, and you're still not seeing results. Usually it's the case that the brand doesn't have a strong engagement strategy, right? At the end of the day, messaging and content, they're somewhat passive, right? You're posting and you're hoping for the best. It's kind of like fishing. You're casting and seeing what bites, right? You have to take that more active role with your audience, right? And make sure that you also have an engagement strategy. And engagement isn't just about clicks and likes, right? The question of every post that you share and every touch point, I'd say, on social media, because you've also got components of your profile that you're putting out there, right? The question you want to ask is, have I made taking one more step with me easy, right? And it's that one more step that we typically think of as the results, whether it was scheduling a call, signing up for an email list, or registering for an event like my client Michelle, right? Did I make that easy? And the ways that we make that easy and the ways that we think through engagement strategy, it's really a two-sided equation, right? We need to make sure we're playing to their motivations and increasing their motivation for taking that next tiny, easy step with us, right? And how are we dialing back perceived risk? Because even though it's a small action, right, signing up for something, I'm still releasing my personal information. I'm still putting time on the calendar to talk to a stranger about my big business needs and problems, right? So how are you making that easy? And how does your engagement strategy drive that from an active standpoint? That's probably what's going on there, right? Working through those three layers. Sometimes we need to improve all three. Usually, folks who are doing the first two right just haven't layered on that last step of engagement strategy.
I think the engagement strategy is really hard to do too, right? Because when you message people on LinkedIn or you follow them, you don't want to feel like a creep. But at the same time, you need to make it easy for them to reach out to you and message you back. Is there a way to not feel like a creep?
I can tell you how I did it at the beginning. I still do it this way, but how I did it at the beginning of my career when I was launched my first business. I knew that I wanted to be a columnist with the website The Daily News. My first business was a career coaching practice that I sold years back. And I knew I wanted to be a columnist. I also knew that I didn't want to pitch them outright. I didn't feel like I necessarily had the authority or the street cred in order to get the column outright. So I did some sleuthing and I figured out where the editors lived online. And I'm going to be crude. I crawled up their butts digitally. I commented on their stuff, I clicked like, and I did this over a course of weeks. And one of them got curious about me, right? And she looked at my website and my blog and the writing I had put out there. And even though I hadn't been published anywhere big or important, right? She saw my work and she reached out to me and she started a conversation. Now, I'm not saying your audience is always going to be the first one to make the first move, but we had a warm connection before that conversation started. And I was actually days away of reaching out from her and saying, like, hey, it's been so much fun interacting online. Do you think we could do a digital coffee? Right? She beat me to the punch, but you can always wink. I call it wink marketing because it's kind of like winking at someone from across the room. You can engage with them online. You can do those little digital handshakes or, getting to know someone before you get super private in their DMs. That's the way to do it without feeling like a creep.
It also sounds like sound dating advice as well, Erica.
It is.
Now, Erica, you've given us some great advice today, some great techniques. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about your work and your company?
Yep. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn or on my website. I'm Erica Breuer. Breuer is spelt funny, Breuer, story of my life. You'll be able to find links to both in the show notes. I have a newsletter, free workshops. You can write with me, create free messages with me. It's really fun.
And she's really nice too, which is always a plus. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today, Erica. It was wonderful and very educational having you on the show.
Thanks, Elizabeth. You asked me some great questions.
Please make sure to check out Erica's website at Erica Breuer, that's ERICABREUER.com, where you can download her free cheat code guide to writing about your brand. This is the Hurley Writes Writing Doc signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing. Hurley Write can help your employees learn better strategies to be effective and efficient writers. Hurley Write has helped numerous companies solve their writing issues, and we can help your team too. Contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com, and one of our writing experts will be in touch.